FAIRtax is coming, don't stand in the way. FAIRtax is coming across the USA. FAIRtax is coming, clean up this mess. We got to get rid of the IRS. Hey, hey! Hey, hey!
Hello and welcome once again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Malero.
And we are
The
FAIRtax
FAIRtax
Guys,
Guys.
dedicated to the idea of getting rid of the Internal Revenue Service, chunking the income tax on the scrap heap of history, and making the fair tax the law of the land. That sounds pretty good, don't you think?
Hallelujah.
All right, well, we're going to take a little bit of different tack with this episode of FAIRtax Power Radio. In the past, we've been trying to extol the virtues of the fair tax really to everybody, because everybody is going to benefit from this thing, and we need everybody's help in pressuring the legislature to get this happen. But one thing that fair tax is really going to affect is businesses.
Yep.
If you own a small business, if you work for a small business, the fair tax is going to be rocket fuel for your economy, and you need to check it out.
Yeah, absolutely. And you remember that back in several episodes, back in the beginning of FAIRtax Power Radio on Spreaker and iTunes, Bob used the routine, you might be a fair tax fan, to explain different aspects of the fair tax. Well, with my wife's help, we wrote some of those particular to business. All right. How are things going to improve for businesses? And let's do it in a somewhat humorous way and use the Jeff Foxworthy style of presentation.
So again, if you own a small business, this is especially for you. But if you work for a small business, I mean, you would want your business to thrive.
Yeah.
So your boss will have money to give you a raise and probably give you a little better benefit package and stuff. So anything that helps small business helps not just the owner and the people that some kind refer to as the fat cats.
Yeah.
Own. I think if you own a business that you're, an artesian well of cash, not always the case.
Yeah,
but
that's right.
If you own a business, you want it to succeed. If you work for a small business, you certainly want that to succeed. And this is where the fair tax is going to just really light things up big.
Yeah, it is. It is. So Bob is going to put on his Bob Paxworthy hat.
Wait a minute here.
All right, and get into
Does this look okay
get into
now?
Character.
Okay, got it.
All right. We all set there, Mr. Paxworthy?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Folks, if you'd like your business tax compliance costs to drop by at least 80% and probably more, you might be a fair tax fan.
Yeah.
That is a biggie.
Yep. Okay, why would your compliance costs drop?
Well, let's explain what compliance costs are to start with.
Well,
this is money you have to spend over and above your tax liability. In order to comply with the tax code, you got to pay your accountants, you've got to spend time and effort keeping records, stuff like that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, as an individual, we have to keep records. If you're a volunteer someplace, you can add up your volunteer costs and try to deduct it from your tax liability and so forth. While businesses have a monumental job of record keeping. Because remember, the tax code is around 75,000 pages, plus including the court decisions. So they have to be aware of all that. If you're a small business, like I've used the example before, my wife and I had a truck leasing business. We were the only two in the business, except for the people that leased the trucks from us, but they weren't part of the company. They were lessees. So we had to keep up with that. But if you're a mega corporation, you really got to keep up with it because there's a lot of stuff there. First, you need to make sure that you're complying to the letter of the law, all right, that you're not leaving anything out. Secondly, you got to make sure that you're taking advantage of every exemption and deduction and exception possible to reduce your tax burden.
And that stuff changes almost daily.
Oh, it's unbelievable.
So that's why you have to hire a professional and hope he knows what he's doing, because this tax code is even too complicated for some pros to handle.
And you remember, back in episode 12, we interviewed Bob Matthews, and he gave the example. He knows of a company, I believe it was up in New Jersey or something, an accounting firm, and it was a large one, a very large accounting firm, and the boss there told him, we have a floor of people, an entire floor of people, and all they do 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, is study the tax code and let the rest of the company know about it. What cost is that? I mean,
people that use that service have to pay for that.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that's because it's so complicated. Now, what are they going to study with the fair tax? Well, for one thing, they're not going to be subject to any income tax. So all of that goes away. There is some record keeping about, stuff that they buy and then sell it. If they sell directly to the consumer, obviously they have to collect the fair tax. But if not, if they're making something that goes into the manufacture of a product, then, there's different things. So, but their compliance costs are going to drop 80 to 90%.
Yeah, it's all going to be computerized, though. A lot of these places already are collecting a sales tax. The point-of-sale software that they use to keep track of their sales is already there. It's just another line of code in there to keep track of the fair tax as well as the state sales tax, and you remit both back to the state taxing authority.
That's right. Yep.
So the infrastructure to collect it is already in place. The infrastructure to enforce it and administer it is already in place. And we have very little history of tax evasion, very little history of problems with the sales tax. And so why not just extend that to the federal level and get rid of this awful, awful income tax?
Yeah, like this guy, Sonny, I know from New York City. He said, hey, what if you went into Sonny's Pizza Emporium and told him you didn't want to pay the fair tax? You'd be out of there on your keister.
Oh, mercy. That's good, Ron. You need a whole series on him.
Yeah, Sonny the video. Anyway, so let's stay with FairTax Power Radio right now. We'll talk about Sonny another time.
Okay.
Okay, what's the next one, Bob?
Well, if you'd like to simplify your payroll calculations by eliminating withholding, you might be a FairTax fan.
Imagine that. You will have no federal withholding, not for income tax, not for payroll tax. All right? The payroll tax is for Social Security and Medicare. Well, it's still going to be taken care of. I mean, we will still collect money for Social Security and Medicare.
We're changing the funding source. We're not getting rid of the program.
No, but it's not going to be done through payroll deduction. Remember, the only people paying for Social Security and Medicare are people who get paychecks. Wealthy people that make investments and get dividends and other returns, there's no Social Security on that. That could be because a lot of people in Congress, they manage, to be maybe a little bit wealthy when they go in there, but when they come away from Congress, they're millionaires, and they have a lot of investments. So I'm not saying that they do that just specifically to help themselves. Do you mean
Congress critters change the law of the land to benefit themselves?
No, I can't even think of that.
That would never happen. Right?
No. Anyways, but, with no payroll withholding for either the income tax or the payroll tax, then your business is going to be greatly simplified. Now, if you have an insurance plan for your employees, obviously that's still going to come out, dental plan, something like that. If you're lucky enough to be in a state that also has state income tax, you'll have to withhold that. Although, I think after the fair tax passes on a national basis, you'll see a lot of states following suit.
Okay.
Yep.
Isn't Georgia taking steps to go that way as we speak?
I believe Georgia is, and I've heard Missouri. I think there's 7 states that are working on it. It's in various stages of
getting rid of their state income tax.
Yeah, and going into a fair tax, a statewide fair tax.
All right. Well, that sounds good.
Those of us here in Florida, we already have that. We don't have an income tax.
Indeed.
We got a sales tax.
That's one of the reasons we live here.
Yeah, you're darn
Put
right.
up with the hurricanes, but we live here.
I go visit New York. I don't live there anymore.
There you go. All right, let's move on.
Okay.
Mr. Business or Ms. Business Person, either one. If you'd like to see the products that you make right here in America be more competitive on the world market, you might be a FairTax fan. Now, Bob Matthews hit this big.
Oh, yeah. We talk about the embedded costs. All right, what does that mean? We've talked about this before. We're going to go over it again. All the costs of doing business get embedded in the product, okay? The cost of raw materials, the cost of the machinery to put everything together if you're making a product, the cost of the computers in the offices, the cost of the cars that the salespeople drive.
Yeah,
all those costs get rolled into the cost of the product.
That the consumer pays.
Exactly, and it is the consumer that pays it. So the cost of keeping up with the tax, the tax code and so forth gets rolled in. So these things, let's say you're making something that sells overseas. So you send it, you have a market overseas and it gets shipped over there. Those embedded costs are there forever. I mean, the way the structure is right now, you can't get rid of them, can you?
Nope.
So how do you get, they're a cost of doing business. They get embedded in there. Now, let's talk about a European company who is making stuff and shipping it to the United States. Yeah. They have an income tax and a VAT tax, a value-added tax. When that product leaves their shores, their government removes the VAT tax. So their product has a tremendous advantage over the U.S. product. I mean, maybe they're sending us a Mercedes-Benz and we're sending them a Cadillac, but the Cadillac has a lot more embedded costs in it than the Mercedes-Benz, because the product coming out of Europe, whether it's Germany or England or whatever, has the VAT tax removed. So they've got a distinct advantage. Now, we fast forward, we pass the fair tax. A lot of those embedded costs disappear, as we talked about in the last one. The cost of doing business, the compliance cost dropped by about 80%. That means that portion of the cost of making your product drops dramatically. So now your product is going to be much more competitive than compared to those products coming out of Europe or South America or wherever.
Your cost drops.
Yeah.
Therefore, your price can drop while you maintain your current profit level.
Exactly.
And you're more competitive on the world market. Yeah. And, if you're manufacturing parachutes and there's a Brazilian company manufacturing parachutes and theirs are less expensive and they both work, which one are you going to buy?
Sure. Yeah. And you're right. Bob Matthews used that example in episode 12. So, and again, it is the final consumer, whether it's a product coming here from Europe or South America or whatever, or it's our product going over there. The person who buys the product, they're actually paying for it, but they're going to look for the best bargain. I mean, wouldn't we all?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So when American products are more competitive on the world market, American business thrives. When American business thrives, people get hired. People have jobs. The fair tax is a jobs bill.
Yeah, that's right. You thought it was just a tax bill, but it's also a jobs bill. My goodness.
Amen.
They packed a lot into 133 pages, didn't they?
Yes. I'll tell you what. And something else here. If you're tired of being punished for your productivity, you might be a FAIRtax fan.
That's right. So you run a tight ship. You run a very well-controlled business. There's not a lot of waste. Your employees are happy. They make good products, and they make them efficiently and so forth. And you sell them around the country, across to other countries or whatever. And the more profitable you are, the more Uncle Sam is there with his hand out, especially through the agency known as the IRS. And they don't mess around.
No. But then again, the corporation just, has to write the check to Uncle Sam, but it's still the final consumer that pays the tax.
That's right. So even though you run a very good corporation or a small business, an S Corp or a LLC, whatever, even though your business is very efficiently run, the more you make, the more you get taxed.
Yeah, it's incredibly important that people understand this concept of embedded taxes, because when you tell people that the fair tax completely eliminates the corporate income tax, i.e. corporations will no longer pay income tax, some of them recoil in horror and think, well, wait a minute, they make billions of dollars, they need to pay their fair share, and they don't realize that fair share gets passed on to the consumer.
Yeah, us. People listening to this show,
pay it.
You pay for the embedded cost. You pay for the corporate tax. There's no way around it. And if the corporate tax, let's say one year we have a Congress and they raise the corporate tax up another few percent, and this corporation is in a very tight market with very active competitive market forces, then they're going to have to do something else, like maybe cut their costs by letting some people go. However you look at it, people pay corporate taxes and corporate expenses.
And the
always.
the corporate taxes are driving our jobs offshore.
Yeah.
The companies that can will leave. And will make their products in Mexico, or make their products in China, or make their products in Canada. That's happening all the time. And people moan and complain about these corporate inversions. That's what the name for that is. And the fair tax fixes it.
Yep.
Because it doesn't just punish them for doing it, it gives them an incentive not to.
Yep. And it's the corporate taxes and the compliance costs. And the compliance costs seem to get higher, worse every year, because they just keep adding more pages to the tax code. Even if they want to undo something that was done 5 years ago by a previous Congress, they don't go back and remove that language. No, that would be too simple. They just add more language saying, oh, back there a few thousand pages, ignore that paragraph. Jeez.
Oh, mercy. Okay, Mr. Business, Miss Business Owner, if you'd like to spend your time and money expanding your business rather than dealing with a tax code, you might be a FAIRtax fan.
And if you've done any research on the fair tax and its beginning through Leo Lindbeck and Jack Trotter and Bob McNair, the legend goes that these three very successful businessmen from Texas were lamenting over lunch or at some point that, at a board meeting, they were spending 80% of their time dealing with the tax code and 20% of their time actually talking about the functioning of the company and how inefficient it was. And that's when the challenge went out, we need to do something about it. Well, let's really do something about it. Because that is a reality in the corporate world. Dealing with the tax code just saps a lot of your time and energy. Now, wouldn't it be nice if you could put your time and energy into building a great company and keeping your employees happy and well paid with good benefits and so forth, and doing it in as efficient manner as possible? But no, you got to spend your time dealing with the tax code. And if it's a small company, you have to do it. You can't hire a battery of CPAs and tax attorneys. You have to do it. If you're a larger company, well, then maybe you can hire a battery of CPAs and tax attorneys. But it's going to cost you.
That adds to your compliance costs.
Yeah, exactly. So if you'd like to have more time and money to actually spend on your business, making your business a good business, a better business, then get rid of the income tax, nuke the IRS, not literally.
Why not?
No. This is a kid's show. It's a family show anyways. But we'll just ask our friends at the IRS to find a real job someplace.
Yes.
But anyways, so you're going to have more time and energy and money to invest into your business. It's just that simple.
Yeah, and let me point folks back to that interview with Bob Matthews, because this is someone who has lived it. I have not owned a business. You kind of did at one point.
Yeah.
But so you know a little bit more about that than I do. But hear it right from the horse's mouth, and how much I'm amazed when I interviewed him how much time and effort he had to spend percentage-wise. How much of his time and effort went to dealing with tax issues as opposed to really growing his company. And Matthews really opened my eyes on that one. Now, what's that episode number again? You know off the top of your head?
Number 12.
Okay.
Episode number 12. Yep. And Bob is a very industrious person. After he got out of the Marines, he has, I think right now he's running like 5 different companies. The guy stays busy. And, this tax code weighs heavily on him all the time. And then you put on top of that, this is another issue, the episode of identity theft. Remember that?
Oh, yeah. He had a little issue with that as well.
Yeah, so he's got to deal with that along with all his business interests. Keep you on your toes.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what. That's amazed that he's able to do what he does.
But it is. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what. Let's move along here. If you'd like to remove the need for lobbyists and thereby level the playing field between small and large businesses, you might be a FAIRtax fan.
Yep. Now, as I mentioned before, small businesses still have a lot of... In fact, let's put it this way. In the small business world, the tax burden is actually usually a lot less than the compliance costs. All right? So you're dealing with the tax code. You're making sure it gets paid. Maybe you have to make quarterly payments, whatever like that. And you have to spend a certain amount of money. You have to have an accountant or a CPA. Again, the small business that my wife and I ran. All right, and there's just the two of us. We still had an accountant, and I did the daily bookkeeping on QuickBooks. I gave him the file at the end of the year, and he charged me between $500 and $1,000 to make sure all the books were kept properly and the tax forms were filed properly and so forth. Even in a year in which we had no profit, that our expenses were so high that we had no profit or very little profit, you still have to keep up with the tax code. You still have to pay your CPA or accountant and so forth. And for the larger companies, it's the same thing. You have to, no matter what you're making, if you're GE making jet engines, or if you're a little tiny company leasing trucks, you still have to keep up with this tax code. Make sure you're doing everything legal, and make sure you're taking advantage of every deduction and loophole that's in there. And there's no way of getting around it. So you can keep up with the large businesses if you're a small businessman, because it's going to reduce the amount of time you have to put in keeping up with this crazy tax code. You can spend time on your business, and you'll be right up there with the big boys. And maybe your business will grow to be a big business someday. Every company starts out at some point with two people in it.
Yeah. It's not quite fair when two companies are competing against each other and one of them can afford to buy tax favors and the other one can't.
Well, you bring up a good point, because that was one thing I forgot about. The large companies, they can hire lobbyists, and the lobbyists go to Congress and they wine and dine these guys. A small businessman, believe me, my wife and I with our two-person company could never do that. I might be able to call my congressman once in a while, but there's no way we can hire lobbyists. So, the fair tax is going to level the playing field between small business and large business.
And here's another one. If you'd like your business-to-business purchases to be tax-free, you might be a FAIRtax fan.
That's right.
Yeah, right now, if you're buying supplies from a vendor, you are paying you're paying the embedded cost of the taxes that he's passing on to you. But every time that you make a sale, if you buy something, that's taxable income to him, and it's just taxes on top of taxes. And business-to-business purchases under the fair tax, no tax whatsoever, because it's paid by the consumer at the retail level.
Yep. Yeah, Bob is absolutely right. I mean, think of something really complicated like a car. There's a lot that goes into making a car, or a commercial truck or something. There's a lot goes in there, starting with digging the iron ore out of the ground and refining it. And every step of the way, people are involved and people pay taxes. And the cost of those people working in your product is rolled into the cost of the product over and over again. All right? So if you...
It's written too close to the paper, huh?
Yeah.
We'll do this again. So, if you'd like your business-to-business purchases to be tax-free, you might be a FAIRtax fan.
Yeah, so...
That doesn't happen now.
Under the fair tax, that all goes away, because business-to-business purchases are not taxed. Why are they not taxed? Again, Bob alluded to this a little while ago. The businesses have to pay their fair tax. Their fair share. You are paying for it, okay? So, to make sure that those compliance costs, those embedded costs, don't get rolled in just like they are now under the fair tax, business-to-business purchases are not going to be taxed. So if you're running a business and you need to buy a pickup truck for your business, you're not going to have to pay the fair tax on that. Now, let's say you have that for a few years and you decide to sell it to the public, and because you need a newer pickup truck. All right. When you sell it to the public, yes, then the fair tax will be charged on it. But when you buy it for business, or if you buy a computer for your office, or if you buy a new copy machine, or you're in manufacturing and you buy a new equipment, all right, business-to-business purchases will not be subject to the fair tax, because that would just cause a rolling embedded cost, and we want to get away from that. That's what we have now, and we're trying to escape that.
All right.
So
we got about 5 minutes left here, so let's go back and recap this for those who may not have heard the whole thing from the beginning.
Okay.
But this is towards business, especially small business. If you'd like your business tax compliance cost to drop by at least 80%, you might be a FAIRtax fan. Oh, you want to say that together? Do it again.
You might be a FAIRtax fan.
Okay, let's try this one. If you'd like to simplify your payroll calculations by eliminating withholding, you might be a FAIRtax fan. If you'd like to see the products that you make right here in America be more competitive on the world market, you might be a FAIRtax fan. If you're tired of being punished for your productivity, you might be a FAIRtax fan. If you'd like to spend your time and money expanding your business rather than dealing with tax issues, you might be a FAIRtax fan. If you'd like to remove the need for lobbyists and thereby level the playing field between small and large businesses, you might be a FAIRtax fan. And if you'd like your business-to-business purchases to be tax-free, you might be a FAIRtax fan. Now, how can any business owner not like that?
Yeah. Well, sadly, there are very large corporations that can afford lobbyists that can help them tweak the tax code in their direction. So the small business people take it on the chin because they can't afford to do that. But we need to get this through because it will put everybody on a level playing field. It's good for the country. It restores our constitutional rights. Bob and I talked about that in a previous episode. The fair tax does so much good for this country. We truly need it.
And I'll ask you the same question I ask you every week. How do we make this happen? What can people do to help get this into pass?
First off, if you have a question for us, or you like or you don't like what you hear, we can take it, thefairtaxguys@gmail.com. Send us an email, thefairtaxguys@gmail.com. If you want to learn more about the fair tax in a quick way, the national website, fairtax.org. And whatever state you're in, there's probably a state website for the fair tax also. Then if you want to get involved, it's bigsolution.org. That's where you can actually get involved. You can help them reach out to other people. You can contribute. You can support them by signing the petition and so forth. And you can still learn more about the fair tax. And then PopVox is completely independent, has nothing to do with the fair tax people, started by these two ladies in Washington. But every pending legislation is there, and you can go to PopVox and weigh in, pro or con, make comments, and your comments get sent off to your congressman and your two state your senators from your state.
But joining Americans for Fair Taxation, that is absolutely critical. We need numbers.
Yeah, we sure do. Yeah, and to be a little crass, we need your money too.
Oh, a little bit. Yeah, the 1040 Club would be a nice thing to do.
Yeah, the 1040 Club is where you commit to sending $10.40 a month. And some of our supporters are sending more. I know one fellow that we see every Wednesday at a business group. He said, "I signed up for $25 a month. Can't thank him enough." You know,
you'll get that back many times over when we get this into law.
And if you want to show your fair tax support by wearing stuff, fairtaxlogostore.org. You can buy shirts, jackets, hats, pens, scrolling banners, just all kinds of stuff. FairtaxLogoStore.org.
Yes, we need umbrellas here in Florida where we get a lot of thunderstorms.
So, and if you're listening to us on Spreaker and you subscribe to iTunes, you can go there. We're both on Spreaker and iTunes. And I'm still waiting to hear from iHeartRadio.
I think you'll be there a while.
Yeah.
All right, but bigsolution.org, that's the website to remember. Fairtax.org as well. And we just need your help. That's all there is to it.
The webinar is the fourth Thursday. Go to fairtax.org/webinar and register.
All right, and that's going to wrap up this edition of FairTax Power Radio. Thank you so much for listening. I invite you to be here every week. New program goes up at, 9 a.m. Eastern every Friday, correct?
Yep, that's right.
See, I'm production, he's distribution. Anyhow, we are the FairTax Guys, Bob Paxton and Ron Malero, reminding you that the fair tax is America's big solution, and once you understand it,
you'll demand it.
Fair tax is coming, don't stand in the